Ethan wiped the grease from his hands onto a rag and peered over the edge of the jagged cliff. Below him, the valley stretched like a shadowed labyrinth, but his eyes weren't on the rocks, they were on the massive nests carved into the cliffsides. Dragons. Real dragons. And they were watching. No human had ever dared this close to their young. Legend spoke of claws sharp enough to slice steel and wings that could whip a man off the edge. Yet here he was, a lone mechanic, drawn not by gold or glory, but by curiosity and necessity. A low rumble echoed through the stone, vibrating through the soles of his boots. Ethan froze. From the darkness of the nearest cave, two amber eyes glowed like molten metal. The dragon had seen him. He stayed perfectly still, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to run, but he knew that sudden movement would trigger a deadly reaction. And yet, there was something in the creature's gaze, something different. A tiny sound, a soft, almost pitiful squeak, broke through the tension. Ethan's eyes shifted. Beneath the towering shadow of the nest, a hatchling stirred. Alone. Unprotected. The adult dragon's eyes flicked toward the little one, then back at Ethan. The warning was clear, stay away. But the hatchling, it didn't retreat. It didn't hiss. It just looked at him with wide, curious eyes. Ethan swallowed hard. This was madness. Dragons never let humans near their young. But something inside him stirred, a mix of fear and fascination. One wrong move, and he could be torn apart. One right move, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could reach the impossible. He took a slow step forward. And the baby dragon took a step too. Ethan froze where he stood, the wind whistling across the jagged cliff like a warning. The baby dragon didn't retreat, it merely blinked at him, tiny wings quivering as if it were trying to decide whether he was a threat. His heart pounded in his chest, loud enough he feared the dragons above would hear it and swoop down to strike. He reminded himself to breathe slowly, keeping his hands visible and his movements deliberate. One false motion could spell instant death. And yet, the hatchling, barely larger than a dog, stepped closer. Its scales shimmered in the dim light, a mix of sapphire and bronze, still soft and pliable, unlike the hard, lethal armor of its parents. Ethan crouched slightly, lowering himself to seem less threatening. "Hey, little one," he whispered. His voice trembled, though he forced it into calmness. "I'm not going to hurt you." The baby dragon cocked its head, eyes wide and luminous, as if it understood every word. Then, a soft chirp echoed from deeper inside the nest. The adult dragons. Their voices were low, guttural rumbles, warning Ethan to step back. His stomach twisted. One wrong glance upward and he might provoke a deadly dive. But the hatchling didn't flinch. He inched forward, careful to keep his weight balanced on the uneven rocks. Each step felt like a gamble. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of sulfur and something wild, dragonfire, raw and dangerous. Ethan's palms were slick with sweat, but he extended a hand, palm up, toward the hatchling. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft, hesitant shuffle, the baby dragon inched forward. Its tiny claws scraped against the stone, but it didn't hiss or snap. It stopped just inches from Ethan's hand and stared at him with pure, unguarded curiosity. Ethan held his breath. Every story he'd ever heard about dragons screamed at him that he should pull back. Instead, he reached out slowly, letting the tip of his finger hover above the hatchling's snout. The dragon flinched, then tilted its head, brushing its nose against his finger. The touch was electric, a tiny pulse that ran up Ethan's arm. It was startlingly warm for a creature of fire, yet soft, delicate, and alive. A sudden roar erupted from above, shaking the cliffside. Ethan's blood ran cold. One of the adult dragons had noticed. Wings spread wide, it loomed over him like a living storm. But instead of diving, it hovered, letting out a guttural warning. The hatchling squeaked back at it, then turned its gaze toward Ethan, as if to say, "Go on. Don't be afraid." Ethan's mind raced. He had to be smart. He couldn't fight a dragon, and he couldn't outrun one across the cliffs. But maybe, just maybe, this one, the hatchling, was different. He spoke softly, his words barely more than a breath. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." The baby dragon blinked, then did something utterly unexpected. It pressed its small body against Ethan's leg. Its scales were still cool, soft under his fingers. Ethan felt a strange, almost overwhelming connection. It wasn't fear, it was trust, fragile and trembling, but trust nonetheless. A gust of wind sent loose rocks tumbling down the cliff. The adult dragons flapped their wings, stirring clouds of dust. Ethan froze, holding his position. One wrong move, and the parents could strike. But the hatchling clung to him, its tiny claws digging in gently, anchoring itself. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes felt like hours as Ethan and the baby dragon remained locked in this silent, dangerous truce. Every sound, the rumbles, the wind, the distant cry of another hatchling, was magnified in the tension. He had no idea what he was doing, no plan, no safety net. Yet the bond forming between him and this tiny creature was undeniable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the adult dragons released a low, throaty rumble and pulled back, circling the air above. It didn't attack, but it didn't leave entirely. Ethan exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. The hatchling chirped softly, nudging his hand as if to say, "See? I trust you." Ethan looked down at the small dragon pressed against him, heart pounding. He knew the real danger wasn't over. The adults were still watching, and one wrong step could end this fragile connection in an instant. But for the first time, he dared to imagine that a human and a dragon hatchling could understand each other. And in that moment, the impossible seemed just a little more possible. Ethan's hand hovered over the hatchling, his fingers trembling more from anticipation than fear. The baby dragon stared at him with wide, amber eyes that reflected the dim light of the cliffside, almost as if it were measuring his intentions. Every instinct screamed that he should pull back, but something deeper, something that had nothing to do with logic, urged him forward. The wind picked up, whipping strands of his hair into his eyes. Above him, the adult dragons circled, wings cutting through the sky like blades. Their eyes were fixed on him, glowing with silent warnings. One twitch of his hand, one sudden movement, and he knew he would regret it. Yet the hatchling did something that froze him in place. It stepped closer, then lifted its head, nudging his palm with its tiny, warm snout. Ethan exhaled slowly, fighting the tremor in his hands. "All right," he whispered. "Just one touch." He leaned down, careful not to cast a shadow over the nest. The baby dragon didn't recoil. Instead, it leaned forward, eyes locked on his. With a gentle press of his fingers, he brushed the soft, iridescent scales along its snout. The touch was electrifying, like a spark running through the still air, and Ethan felt an unexpected warmth, almost like the dragon was responding to him, not just physically, but in some unspoken, emotional way. A sudden, low rumble shook the rocks beneath him. The adult dragons had noticed the contact. Wings unfurled in a threatening display, and one massive shadow swooped closer, the wind from its wings knocking Ethan off balance. His heart leapt into his throat. "Easy, easy," he muttered, instinctively lowering himself to the ground, keeping his body calm and non-threatening. The hatchling pressed against him, tiny claws digging lightly into his sleeve, holding him steady. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the adult dragon halted mid-flight, wings outstretched, eyes narrowing, almost as if it were studying Ethan. It let out a low, throaty growl, not a roar, but a sound that vibrated through the cliffside like a warning. Ethan froze, sweat trickling down his temple. And then something extraordinary happened. The hatchling chirped sharply, nudging its parent's gaze back toward him. Its tiny wings fluttered as if signaling something, a declaration of trust. Ethan's heart skipped. Could it be defending him? He dared to extend his hand further, letting his palm hover beneath the baby dragon's head. Slowly, the hatchling leaned into him, brushing the soft scales of its forehead against his fingers. The warmth spread up his arm, a gentle, living fire that made the hairs on his neck stand on end. For a brief, magical moment, the cliff, the wind, the circling dragons, all of it, faded away. It was just him and this tiny, impossible creature, connecting across a barrier that had existed for centuries. The adult dragons growled again, louder this time, wings flapping more aggressively. Ethan's stomach knotted with fear. One false move, and the moment would shatter. But the hatchling didn't back away. It stayed pressed against him, tiny claws gripping gently, trusting him completely. Ethan realized that the trust wasn't just fragile, it was revolutionary. No human had ever been allowed this close. No human had ever felt this, accepted. He took a deep breath and whispered, "I won't let anything happen to you." His voice shook, but the words seemed to matter. The baby dragon tilted its head, then slowly, almost deliberately, leaned further into his hand, letting him stroke its neck. Its scales were smooth, softer than he had imagined, almost like polished stone warmed by sunlight. The rhythmic rise and fall of its tiny chest against his leg was hypnotic. A sudden gust of wind tore across the cliff, sending loose stones clattering down the slope. The adult dragons flared their wings and hovered threateningly. Ethan froze again, heart hammering. But the hatchling didn't move. It had made a choice, and it was holding to it. Ethan's mind raced. If the adults attacked, he had no chance. But if he could maintain this fragile connection, if he could prove he meant no harm, maybe, just maybe, something unprecedented could happen. The hatchling chirped again, this time softly, almost like a sigh of relief. It pressed its head fully into his palm. Ethan felt a warmth that went beyond the physical, an unspoken bond forming, one that neither time nor instinct could easily break. For the first time, he dared to imagine a world where a human and a dragon could trust each other. And in that instant, the impossible didn't feel so impossible anymore. Ethan kept his hand pressed gently against the baby dragon's scales, feeling the warmth seep into his skin. The hatchling had nestled against his leg, tiny wings twitching with contentment, while the adult dragon circled above like storm clouds. The moment of trust had been made, fragile and fleeting, and Ethan knew he had to act carefully. One wrong move, one careless step, and the entire bond could shatter in an instant. He slowly rose, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. The hatchling followed, waddling in unsteady but determined steps. Ethan's eyes darted constantly to the cliffs above, searching for signs of aggression. The adults watched him like predators on the edge of a hunt, but they didn't swoop. Not yet. All right, he whispered, let's get you some food. He crouched near a patch of rocky ledge and rummaged in his bag. A few pieces of dried meat, leftover rations from his work, he held out tentatively. The hatchling sniffed, then delicately grabbed a piece with its tiny claws. Its mouth opened, revealing a row of small, sharp teeth, yet it didn't bite him. It had learned, in these few short minutes, to trust. Ethan exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. But the danger wasn't gone. He had to find a way to keep the hatchling safe without angering the adult dragons. Every plan he considered carried risk. Yet his heart refused to let him walk away. Not now. Not when the hatchling had already chosen him. Over the next few days, Ethan returned to the cliffs at dawn and dusk, bringing scraps of food and simple care. Each time, the hatchling greeted him eagerly, chirping and nudging against his hands. The adult's behavior fluctuated, sometimes watchful, sometimes aggressively circling, but they never directly attacked. Ethan began to notice subtle signals in their movement, almost like a communication he couldn't fully understand. He realized that the hatchling was influencing them, slowly shifting their instinctive fear into reluctant curiosity. One evening, while Ethan sat on a ledge polishing the hatchling's tiny claws, a shadow passed overhead. A gust of wind knocked his bag over, spilling tools and scraps down the cliffside. The hatchling squeaked, scrambling to Ethan's side. Immediately, the adult dragons flared their wings, a warning thunderclap of sound. Ethan froze, eyes wide. One of the adults swooped close, talons extended, but then paused, hovering as if testing him. Ethan swallowed hard. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly, though his voice shook. The hatchling chirped in response, leaning into him as if confirming his words. For a tense moment, the cliffside was suspended in silence, the air thick with danger and anticipation. Then, incredibly, the adult dragon backed off slightly. It didn't leave, but it didn't attack either. The baby dragon chirped again, this time almost joyfully, flapping its tiny wings in excitement. Ethan's heart leapt. The bond was growing stronger. The hatchling had chosen him, and somehow, that choice was beginning to influence the adults. Over the following weeks, Ethan learned the rhythms of the nest. He discovered hidden crevices where the hatchling could play safely, small pools where it could drink, and ledges where it could bask in the faint sunlight. Every day, he practiced patience, careful movements, and soft words. And every day, the baby dragon responded in kind, leaning closer, trusting him more. One morning, as the sun broke over the cliffs in golden streaks, Ethan watched in awe as the hatchling flapped its tiny wings, attempting to leap from one ledge to another. He held out a steady hand, and the dragon clumsily landed against him, chirping triumphantly. His chest swelled with pride, and with a fear he could barely contain. This was no longer just a fragile trust, it was a bond that could reshape centuries of instinct and fear. Ethan knew the risk was far from over. The adult dragons were always nearby, their watchful eyes a constant reminder of the thin line he walked. But for the first time, he realized something extraordinary: the hatchling had chosen him. And in that choice lay a power far greater than fear, stronger than instinct, the power of connection. As he watched the baby dragon preen against his arm, Ethan whispered, "We'll face whatever comes together." The hatchling chirped, a tiny, confident sound that echoed off the cliffside, as if agreeing. And in that moment, Ethan knew that the impossible was no longer impossible. He had become part of something larger, something ancient and alive, a bond forged in fire, trust, and courage. Above, the adult dragons circled still, cautious and silent, but Ethan no longer felt the same terror. The hatchling had broken the rules of its kind. And now, together, they were rewriting them. The wind howled across the cliffs, tugging at Ethan's jacket and tossing loose rocks down into the valley below. The adult dragons circled above, their massive wings beating the air like thunder, eyes sharp and unyielding. Ethan's chest tightened. This was it, the moment he had been both waiting for and dreading. One wrong move, one misstep, and the fragile trust he'd built with the hatchling could vanish in an instant. The baby dragon pressed against his leg, tiny claws gripping him for stability. Its wings twitched nervously, yet there was no fear in its eyes, only trust. Ethan looked down at it, and their eyes met. In that glance, he felt a quiet certainty. Whatever happened, they would face it together. Above, one of the adult dragons dove suddenly, talons extended. Ethan froze, muscles locked, ready for the worst. But the hatchling chirped sharply and flapped its tiny wings, darting between him and the descending shadow. The adult paused mid-air, blinking, as if confused by this act of defiance. The hatchling had chosen him, and in that choice, it was declaring something no human had ever heard: I trust this one. Ethan took a slow step forward, never breaking eye contact with the looming adult. We're not here to fight, he whispered, voice calm but firm. We only want to protect each other. The adult hesitated, wings beating a tense rhythm. Another descended, circling closer, eyes flashing with suspicion. Ethan felt the pulse of fear and fire radiating from them, ancient instincts that told them humans were dangerous. Yet the hatchling chirped again, pressing against his leg and flaring its tiny wings as if standing up to its parents. It was a bold, impossible act, and it changed the tension in the air. Time seemed to slow. The two massive dragons hovered, circling, assessing. Ethan's heart pounded, but he held his ground, hand lightly resting on the hatchling's back. The little dragon responded with a chirp so sharp and confident that it echoed off the cliffs, challenging its parents, demanding recognition of this new bond. And then, something incredible happened. The adult's wings stilled mid-beat. They hovered, long amber eyes fixed on the human and hatchling. There was no aggression, no attack, only observation. The hatchling chirped once more, softly this time, leaning fully against Ethan. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the adults began to retreat, rising higher into the sky before circling away. Their warning rumbles faded. Ethan exhaled, disbelief and relief washing over him. He sank to one knee, holding the hatchling close. You did it, he murmured. You trusted me, and they listened. The hatchling nuzzled his neck, wings fluttering in tiny, excited motions. It chirped again, the sound like laughter, and Ethan laughed too, a mix of amazement and sheer joy. This small creature, once trembling and vulnerable, had changed the rules of its world. Dragons had always been untouchable, unapproachable, untamed. Yet here, against every instinct, a bond had been forged. For the next hour, Ethan explored the cliffs with the hatchling at his side. It flitted from ledge to ledge, circling him in playful loops, wings beating in harmony with his footsteps. Above, the adult dragons observed silently, no longer hostile but wary, their instincts softened by the impossible trust of their young. As the sun began to set, painting the cliffs in gold and crimson, Ethan sat on a flat ledge, the hatchling curled in his lap. He felt the warmth of its tiny body, the gentle rise and fall of its chest, and a deep, unshakable sense of connection. He realized that this bond wasn't just about survival or curiosity, it was something profound. A bridge between species. A testament to courage, patience, and trust. The wind carried the distant roar of other dragons, but Ethan no longer feared it. The hatchling lifted its head, chirping once more, and Ethan smiled. He whispered softly, we're a team now. Whatever comes, we face it together. The cliffs, once forbidden, now felt like home. Above them, the adult dragons circled one last time, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible. The rules had been broken. The trust had been earned. And in that moment, Ethan and the baby dragon, human and dragon, bound by courage and care, became a new kind of family. A family that could change everything.